All right, guys. So I found an interesting article on Medium that is sort of enlightening in a way. So it kind of covers, well, first I'll give you the title. It's called Male Insecurity and the Manosphere Pipeline: My Story by James Stanley. So obviously it's anecdotal, it's one person's story, but I believe there is like crossing out all the specific little details of like life, there is a whole lot of connection, correlation between this guy's story and the manosphere in general, especially the type of people who get hooked into it, which tend to be conservative men. Um, I've long said that, well, actually, my last video kind of gets into the mental illness of conservatism. It goes into a little bit, it's actually sort of like an offhand point. I didn't really dig into it deeply, but it goes into the research that conservatives tend to have a larger amygdala, which is the fear control center of the brain. So it really makes sense when you step back, let go of any of your preconceived notions of the word conservative, and just think of like the issues, all of the issues, and what they think is important. And it really, honestly, kind of speaks for itself. And I don't think that this specific topic that I'm going to be getting into is, it's not like completely way out of left field. They're highly connected. And one of the key components is insecurity. That's something that you will always find when it comes to conservatives. Insecurity breeds fear, and fear is pretty much what they're governed by. So it just adds up. But it shouldn't take a lot of like research or personal investigation to come to this conclusion. Conservative men tend to have this bravado, this like Donald Trump type. I use him because he's a popular figure, and also I like giving him shit. But he's a perfect example of this. He has this outward manifestation of like ego. He's great. And so it's similar to how narcissism works. So narcissism isn't just, hey, there's a person and they think they're great. No, it's a defense mechanism. And it's always, always created by insecurity. It's always a pervasive, like serious insecurity that underlies it all. And they create this persona, this arrogant, over the top, uh, sort of like personality to, as like a defense mechanism to deal with that insecurity. And you see this all the time. Now, I'm not saying that all conservative men are narcissists, not at all. But I am saying, so narcissism, like pretty much all mental illnesses, is a spectrum. It's not off and on. So you can have many um, characteristics of a narcissist and still develop coping mechanisms in a similar way without actually being a narcissist. Although I would say that a majority of narcissists do fall on the right. I mean, that should be relatively obvious. But anyway, rambling on here. I want to go ahead and dig into this. I'm probably not going to read it all. Maybe I will. I don't know. It seems a little bit long. We'll see. Either way, I'll link it. All right. Come for the dating advice, stay for the ambient misogyny. CW, sex, sexual assault, misogyny. This is my personal story of being a disaffected young man taken in by the so-called Manosphere. This all happened to me in the early 2010s before Manosphere was even a term. Now that I'm in my 30s, I've often thought about sharing my experiences in hopes that it might pull someone back from the ledge. At the very least, I hope to shed some insight into why young men fall into these dark pits and contribute this experience towards the general zeitgeist. I hope that this piece comes across as honest and well-intentioned. I do not seek to retroactively make myself look good. Any frankness I use is not an admission of being proud of my past. Without further ado, let's begin. The classic male virginity story. I didn't know anything was wrong with me until one summer night after my senior year of high school. A popular group of guys came over to my house to drink and smoke. I, ever eager to please, led them all inside and down to the basement. I knew my parents were too burnt out from their jobs to say anything. You guys want to smoke? I asked, trying my best to seem like a seasoned vet. I packed my bowl and we passed it in a circle. Scott cleared his throat. So, Jimmy, he turned his head to me. You and Ashley? He raised his eyebrows and smirked. Huh? I had no idea what he was asking about. I'd gone to prom with her, but only because I didn't know who else to ask. My main objective was not being a loser who couldn't get a date. We went to different parties after prom, I finally replied. Oh, Scott laid back into the torn-up love seat, unsatisfied. My answer told him something I wasn't aware of. Me and Sarah had sex in the backseat of my car, Kyle humbly bragged. Everyone nodded and approved of his success. Nice, everyone said in unison. I looked at the floor and hoped the conversation wouldn't go further. I did that once in the Corvette. It was awkward, way too cramped, Scott shared. I felt like I was in a dream where I had to take an exam for a class I didn't know I was enrolled in. I rifled through my memories. The last time I even kissed a girl was in 8th grade. It was getting closer and closer to my turn. I had no idea what to say. I had always been a terrible liar. Jimmy? All their faces turned toward me in anticipation. I stuttered and nervously twiddled my fingers. I didn't need to say anything. Wait, are you a virgin? My face flushed red and an uproar of laughter commenced. Why didn't anyone tell me? After some elbowing and teasing, everyone went home, or more likely ditched me to go to a real party. The smoke cleared, and I was left Febrezing away the weed in silence. I stepped into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Not the best looking. My wiry glasses and poofy hair had earned me such nicknames as Napoleon Dynamite and Chicken Little at school. It had to be more than that, though. Even ugly guys had girlfriends. It didn't take long for the realization to hit. Supple arms, pale skin, and androgynous face. I'm not a man. My feelings of inadequacy started spiraling. I don't like sports. I cry. I write poetry, for fuck's sake. My dad never taught me about love. Hell, he never even taught me how to shave or file taxes or anything else men are supposed to do. I had flashbacks of playing Barbies with my sister the time we played dress up or school. I spent too much time with my mom and sister. I might as well be a second daughter. I finished what was left of the PBRs and tried to get a grip. I can change, I told myself. I can learn how to be a man. I can lose my virginity. I don't have to accept this fate. Down the pipeline I went. The next day I did what anybody in the internet age does when they want to learn something. I started Googling. How to get girls. How to go for the kiss. How to hook up at a party. These were the types of search queries I was typing in. I'm smart, I thought. As long as I had instructions, I would find the motivation to follow through. Unaware of the concept of SEO marketing at the time, these search queries led me right into the polluted channels of pickup artists, misogynists, and self-help gurus. This was the early 2010s before words like incel, red pill, and manosphere were commonly used. One of my first introductions to this world was the infamous blog-turned-book I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell by Tucker Max. If you're unfamiliar, here are a few exploits from the book to give you a vibe check. Tucker talks about having anal sex with a woman while his friend videotapes it without her knowledge through slats in a closet door. Getting smashed and going hogging, otherwise known as fucking a fat girl. encountering women he classifies as land beast, elephant legs, cow whore, common stock pig, and wildebeest, and attending a convention for little people explicitly to, in his words, fuck a midget. He succeeds. This wasn't just some tiny blip in a niche corner of the proto-manosphere either. I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell remained on the New York Times bestseller list for over 100 weeks. Tucker Max was even named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in 2009. Tucker Max embodied the male archetype that many of us strive to be in the 2010s. He and pickup artists like the guys from Real Social Dynamics were the education I sought out when none else came to me. Unfortunately, the pickup gurus weren't the best role models either, grasping in the dark. The great tragedy of these spaces is that a lot of the advice isn't inherently bad. It's not bad to teach the young and clueless how to be more social and confident. What's bad is the ambient misogyny. You start seeing women as numbers and vehicles for your success. The emotional connection never enters the picture. It's about being the man, i.e., impressing other men. Now, I'll take a moment just to note that this way of thinking never even begins without insecurity. Like, if you're a confident person, you don't give a shit about what other dudes think about you at all. And in fact, not even dudes. Other people's opinion of you should pretty much never enter your mind. And if you don't fall into that trap, you don't end up becoming an insecure person that ends up falling into this retard trap where you go around thinking that fucking women is what makes you successful as a dude. And then you become a piece of shit and pretty much all women hate you. And you end up lonely and fucking hateful, which also fucking funnels into the whole conservative mindset about hating every fucking thing, because you end up being lonely and shitty and everybody fucking dislikes you other than people that think just like you do, which becomes a fucking echo chamber, which only fucking digs you in deeper. Anyhow, I went out to parties. I forced myself to socialize, and I said yes to every event presented to me. I would give myself a quota. You have to get at least one number before you leave, or you have to introduce yourself to 3 women you've never met before. It's a numbers game, so the common axiom went. If you do this enough, you'll eventually get laid. See, it's all about getting laid. Pathetic. My poor, feeble mind had no idea that this salesman tactic might come across as very obvious to the women I was trying to flirt with. If I was rejected, I could always confirm my bias that it was because something was inherently wrong with me. The cure for that, of course, was to double down and dig deeper into the manosphere. Getting what I think I wanted. You can do anything you put your mind to, even if it's shallow and misguided. Plato, probably. I eventually met a young woman who was just as desperate as me. One night when I was at her house, her roommates all left to go party. I turned to her and said in a joking tone, "We should have sex." And to my shock and surprise, she said, "Okay." It was a tipsy blur. I didn't know what I was doing. It was awkward and unremarkable. I didn't even tell her I was a virgin out of pure shame. I just hoped it wasn't evident. We passed out, had an awkward morning, and said our goodbyes. That's it? That's sex? Was all I kept thinking the next day as I slugged hungover through my classes. I felt completely unchanged, still deficient and inadequate in the same undefinable way as I had always felt. One is never enough. To my shock and despair, losing my virginity didn't fix me. I Googled average amount of lifetime sex partners for Americans, and it came out to 4. That then became my new goal. Once I'd accomplished that, then I knew I could finally feel okay about myself. Wow. As I'm typing this, I'm reminded of the Scum Manifesto, 1967, where Valerie Solanas says, and this is Valerie Solanas, misandrist icon and attempted assassin of Andy Warhol. The physical feeling a man attains from sex is next to nothing. He is not empathizing with his partner, but is obsessed with how he's doing, turning in an A performance. It's often said that men use women. Use them for what? Surely not pleasure. He'll screw a woman he despises and furthermore pay for the opportunity. Why? Relieving physical tension isn't the answer, as masturbation suffices for that. It's not ego satisfaction either. The male is psychically passive. He hates his passivity, so he projects it onto women, defines the male as active, then sets out to prove that he is a man. His main means of attempting to prove it is screwing. Since he's attempting to prove an error, he must prove it again and again. She may have shot Andy Warhol, but she knew a thing or two about male psychology. She really did. She just basically described all conservative men like in some really short phrases. The beliefs persisted for years. As you may guess, having sex with 3 more people did nothing to cure the small wound in my chest. Years passed by into my mid-20s. I continued on my path of digging a hole and filling it back up again, thinking it was all for something. I didn't have to read guides anymore. There was no longer any mystery or a drive to improve myself like I had once felt. Now I was just trying to prove myself in some never-ending quest of dissatisfaction. It was my Bukowski era of heavy drinking and cynicism toward love, relationships, and sex. Love to me was nothing but a destructive flame that men were driven to like moths. There was no glory in anything besides the most banal of human endeavors: drinking, fighting, and fucking. The unfortunate logical conclusion of toxic masculinity. Okay, that last part might have come from G.G. Allen. For he who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man. Samuel Johnson. Truth be told, I wasn't cut out to be that hardened, cynical barfly. It was all a grand defense mechanism for the sensitive romantic that I was. One day, after a particularly unfulfilling hookup, I couldn't run from the conundrum anymore. I looked in the mirror and asked myself a painfully obvious question. If you're not enjoying this, then who are you doing it for? Which path forward, disaffected young man? That moment in my life was when I finally started to unravel and unpack all the bullshit I had sponged up during my misguided youth. Ironically, the worst advice possible, so says the Manosphere, of be yourself ultimately ended up being the best route possible for me. Surprise, surprise. The Manosphere is all a bunch of dudes who are scam artists who are trying to like bullshit you normally for them to make money. Even if they're spouting bullshit and they know it, they can make money off of it because there's so many insecure men who follow this shit. Anyway, no progress was ever going to be made until I accepted that I didn't fit into any of these male archetypes I was trying to so desperately to cram myself into. And that's because I would say 95, maybe higher percent of all men who seems to fill those archetypes are fake. They're the same person you are. They just push it further and they ingratiate themselves even deeper. Those guys do not exist naturally. They're all fake. They're all pretending to be that because they're insecure. Always. In this journey to connect with masculinity, many men sadly abandon themselves. They throw out their perceived feminine traits to force a more classical male identity on themselves, even if it doesn't fit them at all. The most horrifying part, I fear many men have worn and will wear that mask to the grave. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him, I say. Stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. Charles Bukowski. That's a really good fucking poem, by the way. It didn't have to be this way. Cis men want to feel affirmed in their gender just like anyone else, of course. They'd never use that language, but it's true. It is true. I had no positive male role models in my life at that point, at least none that could show me that my perceived feminine traits don't need to be destroyed and buried. It was anathema to me that I could have both feminine and masculine traits and not have to feel rigidly defined by them. Solutions, just like with drugs, sex, and rock and roll, if nobody educates the young, they will educate themselves. This is how harmful myths and rumors spread. We do a great job at deconstructing toxic masculinity and other harmful ideologies, but we fumble the ball when it comes to creating new models of masculinity. Every so often I lurk the old subreddits whose shores I washed up on so many years ago. I do my best to question and challenge the beliefs of the young men there and hope that I can at least undo a thread or two for them to unravel on their own later. I don't think things are as doomed for the younger generations as some might say with the rise of personalities like Andrew Tate. I think there's plenty of room for those young men to be turned around. We just need to ask them critical questions and present a model to them that is still masculine, but without all the toxic hangups. And I do not, because I know a lot of people are thinking it now. This guy is not an exception to the rule. He's not some rarity. I've seen this again and again and again. The only difference is like some people don't have the observational intelligence to be able to view these things and see what they really are. They only see the obvious, the shallow. They don't understand the root of this behavior. And the root of this behavior is almost always insecurity. This guy is not rare. This is all of the dudes that you see, especially online, that are like really tough and talking about beating guys' asses and like constantly. That's all they ever do is like pick fights and start shit with people because they want to like perceive themselves as masculine, and that only happens when you're insecure. Only. Like you're not obsessed with being a badass if you're confident. You don't care what other people think about you if you're confident. But it's really interesting, and there's a lot of correlation here with the previous video, as I said. It's I don't know. But it's sad. But I also have to say that this guy just being absolutely, completely blunt, honest about how he thought in the past. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, they either keep playing the game and dig themselves in deeper, they become lonely, shitty, and fucking hate the world. And they're not even themselves. They're like some fucking bullshit creation that they think is what they need to be for their own fucking insecurity to be alleviated. Or I don't remember what I was going with that. Or I'm a little bit inebriated, but yeah. So I think that we might can kind of curb this toxic conservative like psychological illness shit to some extent if we reach young men and even young women, but not in this specific topic. But when it comes to like the mental illness of conservative thinking, if you kind of reach them early, then there's a far better chance. That's kind of stating the obvious. But in my experience, once they've pushed past a certain point, once they like religiously watch Fox News or like they love Tucker Carlson or Ben Shapiro, Andrew Tate, eh, or like Alex Jones type shit on the extreme end, they're usually too far gone. At that case, all you can do is just call them morons, and they'll never understand it. They'll just think that you're like throwing like playful, like competitive, this is my side shit, although you're just being honest. They are stupid. But I would love to be wrong, but in my personal experience, it's always just there's no point. You can and another thing, and I covered that in the last video as well, they are impervious to logic. And that goes back into the anti-intellectualism, which is the most dangerous of all of the fucking traits of the right. Because what it means is there's no bar by which they measure reality. Like it's all emotional. It's all intuition. It's not logic. And that's why these retarded people like Donald Trump, Andrew Tate, they can throw out this crazy shit. They can just throw out insane crap. And they'll buy it because they're not looking to find out what is true. At least if they are, they're using a really shitty mechanism for determining it. But Yeah, I hate to say it, but and yes, I'm a little bit cynical and jaded here, but I think big picture, there are exceptions, but big picture, they can't be fixed. They're fucking stupid. Like you can't reach them. It's like trying to train a mouse how to speak. The mouse doesn't have the cognitive ability to understand language. Now, obviously, this isn't a perfect analogy, but um, given the difference in intellectual capacity, I would say it's still pretty accurate. That is the primary big issue, the big language gap between conservative people, especially highly conservative people, and everyone else. They're stupid. You can't reach them. Anyhow, thank you for your time.